Ed Schultz sadly died today. He was 64 years old. Everything I've read, he died of natural causes, so I guess we'll see what those natural causes were. I only met Ed Schultz once at MSNBC, where I used to work. When I was coming up, as far as even getting interested in politics, even before I started as a journalist or anything like that, I pretty much watched two people. In the mid 2000s, I watched Keith Olbermann before he went insane over this Russiagate stuff, because I thought he was a real special voice as far as going after the Bush administration, the lies over Iraq, and those things. I thought Keith Olbermann was the kind of program that could mesmerize you. So I think that Keith Olbermann was the first one I really got into. Then Ed Schultz was the second one I really got into. And Ed Schultz, I actually worked at MSNBC, so I would be in the newsroom and hear him like ranting on the Ed show at MSNBC. And Ed Schultz was the rare breed. He could throw a bomb, so he was a bomb thrower kind of broadcaster. Whether you liked him or not, I mean, he wasn't boring to watch, that's for sure. But he was also, you kind of, when you watched Ed Schultz, you got the feeling that like, this is a blue-collar guy. I could see him literally giving this same rant in a union hall, a labor union hall, at a bar with a bunch of workers after they get out of work. He just came across that way. It wasn't BS, what he was saying. A lot of journalists and anchors, what they portray themselves on TV is not how they are when you actually speak with them in real person. Ed Schultz was that way. I didn't know him personally. I heard, some things that he could be difficult and blah, blah, blah. So could a lot of journalists, including myself probably. But I thought Ed Schultz, as far as being a real progressive, was one of the true ones in an endangered space for actual progressive journalists. I'm not talking about Rachel Maddow, who's like acceptable progressive, right? Rachel Maddow's progressive to a point, and that's why she's allowed on MSNBC. Chris Hayes used to be progressive before he, got millions of dollars, put on a fancy suit, and now he just kind of does Democratic Party talking points for a living at 8 o'clock on MSNBC. But Ed Schultz really was a true progressive host. He was for the worker guy. I remember watching him during the special elections, I believe, where they had the, whatever that was in Wisconsin, Bill 5, where Scott Walker was trying to basically decimate labor unions' ability to collectively bargain. And Ed Schultz went out there and he was with the workers in Wisconsin. He did the same thing in Ohio. He was really a voice for the people. And frankly, that's why he eventually got fired from MSNBC, which I'm about to remind you of. So I want to play this clip, which I thought was that truly shows you who Ed Schultz was. And again, if you're just coming to this late, it's sad to have to say this, but he passed away today, 64 years old. They said natural causes, so I'm not the guy doing the autopsy, so we'll find out what happened. But 64 is very young. He obviously, he lived a busy life. I don't know if he had health problems. I know his wife had cancer the last few years, but that was apparently in remission. Kamisha Wari says, my dad took me to a Teamsters Local 200 meeting where Jimmy Hoffa was talking. Ed Schultz is like Hoffa, really for the unions. Senate Bill number 10 in Wisconsin. That's right. And I remember I was covering in Florida a meeting with union members where Alan Grayson, who was running for senator there, was giving a speech. But Ed Schultz was the one who brought down the House. Ed Schultz brought down the House, speaking to those union members. And let's face it, unions in America are endangered species. They got endangered during Bill Clinton in the 90s, got more endangered during Barack Obama in the 2000s, and have become, they're starting to fight back more, thank God. But Trump is no friend of unions. Frankly, the Democratic Party hasn't been real friends to unions in many years. If you read Thomas Frank's book, Listen Liberal, you will see that is where the Democratic Party started shifting in the 1970s. away from the New Deal coalition of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, away from labor unions and manufacturing workers and factory workers, basically to suburbanites and managers and Wall Street. So let me play this clip so you can see what I think was Ed Schultz in his purest sense. Here we go.
I want to play this tape. This is the president just a moment ago mentioning this network, MSNBC. Here it is.
I want to talk about some stuff that creates some controversy because it's important. And one of those policies right now that I'm focused on is new trade agreements with other countries. And if you were watching MSNBC and all this stuff and you're thinking, oh man, well, you know, I love Obama, but what's going on here? So I want to set the record straight here. I want everybody to be clear about what we're doing because I believe in what I'm doing here.
Well, Mr. President, I want you to know that I believe in what I'm doing. And if you can prove to the American people that there will not be a depression of wages, if you can prove to the American people that this will create jobs, if you want to go face to face with me, President Obama, I'm ready to go because I have the facts, okay?
Hey, Ed,
and I also
you should be very proud. You should be very proud. I think he is talking about you. And I'll tell you why. Because, as I said on the floor of the Senate yesterday, to the best of my knowledge, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and CNN, to the best of my knowledge, have not discussed the largest trade agreement in the history of the United States of America. And we might want to ask why that is the case.
Well, you know, why would President Obama use the MSNBC call letters? It's been shown by Media Matters that this show has covered the TPP more than anybody else, so I would imagine that he's talking about the Ed Show. But the president has never done a sit-down interview with Ed Schultz. And, hey, you know, my life is fine. But you know what? On this deal, the president's wrong and I'm right. The president is telling the American people that every union in this country is wrong. And I can tell you that every union in this country has been around longer than President Obama when it comes to trade deals and having to live with them.
And not just unions, Ed, not just unions.
Yeah.
You got many environmental organizations that have deep concerns with this agreement as well.
Okay. Senator Bernie Sanders, I'm sorry to interrupt the interview.
That's
I appreciate how courteous you were in allowing us to do that, but we wanted to take the president live.
Good.
Thanks so much, Senator. Appreciate it. President Obama, a word from this broadcaster to you. Put my credibility up against any broadcaster in this country. I supported you big time. I was the first liberal talker to support you. I've carried your water big time when it comes to health care. I've carried your water on the economy and defending your move on the automobile industry. But, Mr. President, you can take shots at this network, but I guarantee you, you are wrong on this, and you cannot prove to the American people. This is not about generic talk that we have to think about the global economy and the cat's out of the bag and everything else. American workers will suffer if this deal goes through. And, Mr. President, your recovery of the economy, the automobile industry, and health care will not be your legacy. It will be what you're doing to the very people who put you in office. Had you not had the unions, you'd have never beat John McCain. Had you not had the unions, you'd have never beat Mitt Romney. And now you're turning your back on these people, trying to convince them that they got to do this phony trade deal that's going to ship jobs overseas. I'd love to talk to you face to face, Mr. President. We're back with more on the Ed Show. Keep it right here. You are watching.
Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen to that? And by the way, rest in peace. Rest in peace. That was in April 2015. His ass was fired in July. His ass was fired from MSNBC in July. He was the only anchor on MSNBC, frankly, in the corporate media that I saw, that went after Obama on the TPP. And for his troubles, I'm surprised they didn't fire him the next day. And I happen to know people who worked at MSNBC on his show. And they told me at that time that Ed and MSNBC president Phil Griffin had been fighting for weeks because MSNBC And Ed talked about this actually in the last few months. He came out and said, yeah, MSNBC tried to stop me from reporting on Bernie Sanders, especially during the campaign. And that was the most censorship I ever got in my entire news organization, in my entire news career, was at MSNBC. So he gives an impassioned speech like that against President Obama trying to ram the TPP through, which was literally, I mean, TPP was like NAFTA on steroids. And most of my reporting, I see the damage NAFTA has done, because all you got to do is drive through the Midwest and other parts of the country to see what these free trade deals have done to American workers. Yeah, we have a globalized market and la, la, la. And yeah, technology has made a lot of jobs obsolete. But that's not, that's something that out-of-touch politicians, frankly, people like my brother, who I love dearly, but works in the finance industry, they say because they're not affected. They just say it as a matter of fact. Well, you got to get with the times, these factory workers and these people who work with their hands. No. You're our government. Not me, I don't work with my hands, but you are the government. So you're not supposed to leave people to die. You're not supposed to leave people without an ability to find work. You think that they would start in all this tech industry, the tech industry right now, in Silicon Valley. You think they would just say, hey, Facebook, hey, Twitter, hey, YouTube. We think we want to just, we want to make it so that other countries could do the social media. We don't need you anymore. So we're just going to close down Silicon Valley. We're going to close down Facebook, Twitter. We could get that done in India. Right? We could get that done in China and Mexico, and all just go back to get retrained for the jobs of tomorrow. You think that would happen to Silicon Valley workers? I don't. And let me tell you something. And I didn't know Ed Schultz. I talked to him once. That was a brave thing he did at MSNBC, because he knew when he was going after Obama that he was going after MSNBC. He knew when he was going after Obama, he was going after Comcast, who owns MSNBC and is a corporation that basically was a driving force behind ending net neutrality. That's the progressive network, MSNBC. He knew what he was doing, and he knew by him doing that, there's a good chance he can get fired. And by the way, he paid for it. Ed Schultz, for his troubles, got put into media Siberia. And in the last few years of his life, he was an anchor on RT America. I like RT America, but I'm not going to pretend that RT America has the same audience as an MSNBC. It doesn't. There's nothing wrong with working at RT. I think Lee Camp does a great job. I think Ed, before his very untimely death today, did it. I enjoyed his show the few times I saw it. But there are so few people out there like Ed Schultz. There are not that many fire-breathing anchors that are actually progressive and will not just toe the line, ranting against Trump as if America was just dandy. America was just super duper dandy before Trump became president. The corporations were wonderful citizens. No, Ed Schultz was consistent. And he didn't just rant against Trump because he saw a lot of issues were happening during the Trump administration that had nothing to do with Trump. I saw Ed Schultz continue on his RT America show covering Standing Rock and the fallout from that awful decision and those unlawful protests. I saw him covering things like porphyrognathic acids that have been dumped in waterways all over this country. In English, basically chemicals that are used to make Teflon and other cooking ware that are cancer causing and have been dumped in waterways in the Ohio River Valley, in North Carolina, and many other places. Ed Schultz is covering that. So if you're not a student of real progressive media, I mean real, not some of the ones that are out there claiming to be progressive but aren't. Do yourself a favor tonight. Do YouTube search and watch some of Ed Schultz's old clips. You will realize we just lost one of the great ones. in my opinion. One of the great ones. And I don't, again, I don't want to talk like I knew him, but I do know that from people that did know him, he did do a lot of things that were not made public to help the people that he covered, financially speaking, to help a lot of people, and he did not want credit for it. So Ed Schultz, taken to us far too soon, and I don't pretend to be anywhere near Ed Schultz, but I do say that I care deeply about the real stories in this country. I care deeply about those communities that are getting taken advantage of and screwed. I care deeply about when I go into communities like Flint and other communities, and it looks like a bomb was just detonated and cities are left to die in this country, while I keep hearing talking points, oh, the economy's humming along here. No, the economy is humming along for very few people. That's what's actually happening, folks. The economy is humming along for well-connected and, frankly, very few people. The majority of people in this country are not doing well financially, live paycheck to paycheck. So, and Princeton just did a study. Speaking of Ed Schultz, who was a champion of labor workers, Princeton just did this study. Princeton economists find that unions had a historical role in helping address income inequality. And unfortunately, income inequality has exploded since labor unions have gone under attack in this country. The rise in income inequality between skilled and unskilled workers since the 1970s might be due, at least in part, to a decline in union membership. Princeton University researchers have found. Blah, 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 blah. Let me get into it. The study is the first to take a long-term look at the relationship between income inequality and union membership. Previously, there hadn't been a reliable source of union membership at the individual or household level prior to 1973. The researchers examined a new source of union membership data dating to the 1930s, monthly Gallup opinion polls that collected a variety of information about Americans, including their race, gender, income, and political opinions. The pollsters also asked interviewees whether a member of their household belonged to a union. Among the study's findings were that unions consistently have provided workers with a 10 to 20% wage boost over their non-union counterparts over the past 8 decades. The researchers also discovered that when unions have expanded, whether at the national or state level, they tended to draw in more unskilled workers and raise their relative wages, with significant impacts on inequality. Quote, what we're simply trying to do in this study is to be able to say something systematic, historically, whether there seems to have been an inverse relationship between unionization and inequality, so that when unions were strong, inequality tended to be lower. And why I think this study is important in the context of Ed Schultz's death. Ed Schultz was like not a poor guy. He did pretty damn well at MSNBC, from what I understand, as far as how much money he was making. He was a longtime radio broadcaster as well. So a lot of people, especially journalists, when they start to make a good amount of money, Dustin, thank you for the $5 you just left. As a reminder to anyone coming late, I am now monetized and I have a super chat, so you could leave funds if you'd like. Those funds are going so we can get back on the road. So thank you to everyone who's been super chatting and leaving money. Most journalists and anchors, the more money they make, the more well-to-do they get, they kind of start distancing themselves from the causes and the communities and the people that they used to champion, because they're no longer in touch with those communities. That is why I very rarely, go to cover like a wealthy community with a problem. They got enough help. I go to the poorest of the poor communities. I've had offers to take first class before, and I turned them down. It might not seem like a big deal to you, but to me, the minute you take first class, you start forgetting the working class. The minute you shower yourself with artificial, materialistic things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like to take a vacation now and then. I like nice things in life, but I don't need them, because my happiness is not derived from that. Pleasant things and showering myself with nice things. My happiness is seeing when people are getting screwed and being able to help those people. That's what makes me happy. And I see a lot of that in people like Ed Schultz. I see, he was somebody that started doing very, very well financially, but never stopped covering the labor union movement, never stopped covering the fight for health care. The Ed Show used to cover those free healthcare clinics a lot on the Ed Show on MSNBC. Ed Schultz, no matter how much money he was making, cared about the vulnerable, cared about communities that are getting taken advantage of. So again, it's very sad that he has passed away. I think he was intentionally marginalized and silenced in the last few years of his life. When MSNBC fired him, essentially for going up against the Obama administration and being a little too pro-TPP. You're allowed to be like a little bit progressive, but not economically. If you start calling out the corporations and the companies and the banks and all that on MSNBC, you're gone. You're gone. CNN too. And of course, Fox News. Yes, he was silenced. Of course he was silenced, Mitch asks. Nobody would hire him. He had to go to RT America. I'm not knocking RT America, but this is a man who had 30 to 40 years of media experience. He should have easily gotten a job on NBC, CBS, ABC, PBS. Easily. He had a large audience at MSNBC. When Keith Olbermann left, he eventually ended up as Keith Olbermann's replacement at 8 o'clock p.m., which is prime time. That's the coveted time slot, 8 o'clock, and he did very well in the ratings. So yes, he was silenced in the last years of his life, and it's very sad, very sad.